Hello, and welcome to another episode of Living Library. And you may hear a little bit of background music and voices going on because I am sitting in a restaurant, which I think is pretty appropriate for what I want to talk about today, and that is the subject of homelessness. I was, during my beginning middle school years, I was homeless. Of course, through no issue or fault of my own, but I was displaced from my home as a result of sexual abuse that occurred between two of my family members, and it completely displaced our home environment. And so we spent about 4 months, my sister, my mother, and I, going from house to house, and relying on the generosity, or rather lack of generosity, of the people that we encountered during those times. And so one thing that I learned during that time was that people can treat you like the poor relative, but God will never treat you that way. Another thing I learned is, it can seem like there is no hope, there's no chance, there's no possibility that you're going to pull out of despair. You're going to pull out of a circumstance that you yourself did not set into motion. But God always comes through, and He's always looking out, even when you don't necessarily believe in Him or trust in Him as your Lord and Savior. And that's one of the fascinating things about God, is that He doesn't treat us the way some of us would if we were God. God doesn't wait until we love Him first before He takes care of us. He doesn't wait until we put our trust in Him before He shows that He is a faithful and true and sovereign God. And some of the other experiences that I learned during that time was the fact that, adults can take advantage of other adults when they're down, or when they're, having a real crisis moment in their life, which is one of the things that happened to my mom when she was having this crisis moment. Imagine being the parent that finds out that, your child has been sexually abused for several years, right under your roof, and having to deal with the fallout of that, having to leave the place where you resided because you can't cover it on your single income, so you're forced out of the place where you're living. Imagine having 2 daughters and having to figure out where you're going to live every single day, where you're going to spend the night every single day. Imagine having relatives that won't help you, that won't house you, because you have 2, preteen, teenage daughters, and nobody wants to deal with that at that particular time. And so I watched my mom, go through dealing with that. I watched her, receive public assistance. And during that time, those people that we were staying with, rather than saying, I will help you out, I'll let you gather your funds together so you can find a place to stay, most of them wanted all of the public assistance that she was getting, which of course did not allow her to really fully get back on her feet in a quick period of time. But in many ways it kind of kept us almost in a slave master state, because if you are giving the majority of the assistance that you're getting to someone that you're staying with, then it makes it hard for you to move out of that position into your own. And so during that time, we watched as, people would take the monies from her and those different things, and, rather than take the money, as they said, and, we'll make sure that we feed you and those kinds of things. For 4 months, we wound up eating, my sister, my mother, and I, The people that we stayed with, they fed us white rice and lima beans with no meat. And to this day, I have a problem eating white rice and lima beans because of that experience. So their family ate very well. They took the funds and fed their family steak and chicken and other things while they fed us white rice and lima beans and said, hey, we're doing our duty, we're making sure that you eat. And so that was their response to us being homeless. We didn't really have a place to put our things. We had 2 garbage bags of clothing, and that was it. So we pretty much had to leave everything that we had during that time at the house where we left, because we didn't have anywhere to go and we didn't have any place to put it. Once we got into our own place, ironically shortly before Hurricane Andrew hit in South Florida. When Hurricane Andrew hit, even though we were staying in a pretty small place, it was a duplex with concrete floors, no AC, no heat. The place surprisingly, miraculously held up. What was interesting that didn't hold up was the home of the person who had housed us during our time that we were homeless. Their home was completely stripped, and the only thing left was the concrete slab. So after the hurricane, this person who had, not really treated us well while we were homeless, they were the first persons on our doorstep asking for a place to stay. My mom chose to help them out financially during that time so that they could get a place to stay. But she did not, house them, because my sister and I, not saved. We were like, no, we do not want these people living here. They've made our life pretty much a living hell for 4 months, and we don't think we can take another round of that. So my mother, heard us out, and she gave the person who had housed us, she gave them some funds to help them in the interim while they were waiting on their FEMA, federal emergency money, to rebuild their home. I said all that to say that you really have to be careful how you treat people when they're down. You really have to evaluate how you would want to be treated if you were in that circumstance or that situation. I will say that experiencing that in my middle school year was a life lesson for me on how to treat people, on making sure that I treat people with kindness and with respect, regardless of what quote-unquote lot in life or station in life that they have been dealt. Because it is really only by the mercy and the grace of God that you are, or I am, in a position to do anything, to be a blessing, or to help someone, or to encourage someone. So you never know where a person is going to wind up. You never know what's going to happen to that person in the future, and you also never know when the tables will turn. So I just encourage you today that the next time you see a homeless person, that you don't, number one, automatically assume that they wanted to be homeless. The next time you encounter a homeless person, number two, that you don't automatically assume that they're not doing anything to get help, or they're not doing anything to get on their feet. There's a large percentage of homeless people in the United States who are working. They're working homeless, meaning that they are earning a wage, but it's not enough to cover their living wage or their living expenses in whatever city that they live in. So these are some things I just want you to consider as you go throughout your day, as you are dealing with people, as you're communicating with people. Don't always assume that a person's position can tell you who they really are as a human being. We've all heard, the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but often that's really what does happen. But I want to encourage you today to not judge a book by its cover, and to be generous today, to help somebody in their time of need, because you never know when the table will turn. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. This is another Living Library segment. I am Shantae Charles. God bless.